Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today our topic is this: when is it our place to speak up? Now before we dive into this message today, I want to encourage you to do a couple of things for me real quick. Hit that subscribe button below. It really helps us out here. Give us a thumbs up, leave a comment below. We love it when you do stuff like this. Also, do me another favor. If you want, head over to our website today. That's beresolute.org, beresolute.org. There's all kinds of great materials for you over there, including a daily devotional. If you're looking to get into reading the Word on a regular basis with me, I would love to have you do that with me. It would be a blast. Plus, you would really grow in your faith by getting into the Word on a regular basis. You can find it in all formats: video, audio, and written formats, whatever your pleasure is, and it's always short, sweet, and to the point. And with that, let's dive into our message today, which is, when is it our place to speak up? Well, guys, there is a lot happening in the world today. And because there's so much happening, I think often we can feel confused and frustrated. And for many of us, we feel compelled to speak up. I know I do. But the challenge is knowing how and when to do this. And as I have reflected on this conundrum, I have had many moments throughout my life where I was unsure if I was supposed to speak up or not. This happened in my teens, it happened in college, it happened in my career, and it frequently happens in my marriage, where I'm unsure if I'm supposed to open my mouth or actually just keep it shut. But after a quick assessment, I think we will all soon discover that there is regret on either side of this issue, because there have been moments I have not spoken up, that I regretted not saying something, and there have been moments in my life I have spoken up that I've regretted saying something. And I've lived long enough to live on both sides of this regret. Many, many, many times. Let's just put it that way. But I've learned one thing from this experience in my life, and that's this: it's never, ever perfectly safe to speak. Nor is it perfectly safe to not speak. It's dangerous and risky on both sides of this conundrum. And at some point, we simply have to say something. And by saying something, we are attempting to create order out of chaos, or create chaos where there is disorder or misorder, and attempting to speak truth into the situation. So when we speak, we are always taking a risk, always. And in this section of Job, a young man takes a risk, a big one. Here's the situation. Job has been speaking with 3 older men who were his friends. Now, this has cycled to an end, and we find that there was another man listening in, a 5th guy. Now, he's much younger than the other 4 guys. His name is Elihu, and he finally speaks up, mostly because he's irritated with everybody else. In fact, of everyone who speaks in Job, Elihu speaks the most. He speaks even more than Job and God. His material consumes 6 very long chapters, and it's quite spectacular how he builds his case. It's so good that God never condemns his words at all. But what I found even more interesting about these 6 chapters is how Elihu addressed the issue. It was not just what he said, but how he did it that was very interesting. In a very tense situation, Elihu handled this matter very eloquently. He spoke up in a way that teaches us, I believe, 4 things about speaking up when a situation demands that we should do so. So today we're going to look at 4 sections of these 6 chapters and learn how to, speak up when it's our time to do so. Here's number 1. First, if a situation demands you speak, you must check your emotional dashboard before you speak. Just check your emotional dashboard. So I'm going to read 2 parts of Job chapter 32. It's 32 verse 6 and then 32 verses 18 through 22. Here's how it begins. I am young in years and you are aged. Therefore I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. Jumping down, he says, for I am full of words. The spirit within me constrains me. Behold, my belly is like wine that has no vent, like new wineskins ready to burst. I must speak that I may find relief. I must open my lips and answer. I will not show partiality to any man or use flattery toward any person, for I do not know how to flatter, else my Maker would soon take me away. You know, as Christians, we do have a responsibility to speak up, but how we speak up matters. And Elihu sets a good example as a younger man. He goes directly to the party and offers some feedback. And there are 3 actions he takes that I think are very commendable. First, he's open about how he feels. He's aware that something isn't right within him. Now, I'm not sure how you might categorize his feelings here, maybe frustration or anger, but he's in touch with his feelings enough that he can actually regulate them and share them with some level of accuracy. And he shares them in a very vulnerable way. Second, he shares his concerns about sharing. This is also commendable since it signals to the guys that he's about to give them feedback that he has some level of discomfort about. And then third, and I think this is very important, he tries to be impartial in his feedback. I think based on the chapters of material we can read from Elihu, he really tries to be as objective as possible, even though he's very, very worked up and passionate. He attempts to identify that root problem and works hard to not assign blame where there is no blame, thus distracting from the core issues. Have you ever done that? And honestly, he does such a good job with it that God never corrects him. Now, these are 3 awesome steps. Let me restate them. They were this. First, being open about how we feel. Second, sharing genuine concerns. And then third, focusing on being impartial. But you know what my problem is? My problem is remembering to do these things when I need to do them the most. If I could just remember to do these things when things got heated, man, I'd be a lot more like Elihu here, wouldn't you? But there is one thing we can do to help us remember. It helps me to take that first next step. It's this. It's becoming more aware of how I feel, how you feel. For example, when we encounter moments that elicit frustration or anger, we must choose to listen to our feelings. Feelings function a lot like the indicator lights on the dashboard of our car. They tell us when something isn't functioning right. They alert us, right? And rather than ignoring our feelings or just speaking and acting, we should listen to our feelings because they're indicating something to each one of us. I've discovered that I'm much better at responding to people when I recognize my emotional dashboard is lit up and alerting me that something isn't right. So I pull myself to the side of the road and I do a couple of things. Number 1, I assess what I'm feeling. Number 2, I assess why I'm feeling it. And once I have a handle on the feelings and the reasons, then I respond. It's pretty simple. All this can happen in the confines of our mind within just a few seconds or moments. And simply by taking the first step of becoming more aware of how I feel, I have found that I respond better. When I'm aware of that my emotional dashboard is all lit up, I respond to everyone better. I respond to my wife better in moments of tension, better to my boss when I'm frustrated, better to my children when they're disobedient, and better to that car in front of me that just cut me off. But it all starts with awareness, right? But still, in life, there are these moments we are all caught off guard when this happens, right? They happen, these moments tend to happen and are a surprise, right? They are moments that we might be caught off guard and don't know how we feel. And I believe that there is nothing wrong with signaling to another person by saying something maybe of this nature. Number 1, I'm just not sure I'm ready to respond to you right now. Or number 2, I need some time to kind of process what I just heard. Or you could even say, I can answer you right now if you like, but I need to assess how I feel for a minute. And you know what? We're never going to be perfect, but we can take one step at a time and mature through these experiences, like Elihu demonstrates for us here. So the next time a situation demands you speak, check your emotional dashboard first. And then when you have assessed what you feel and why you feel that way, speak up and be vulnerable. Number 2, if a situation demands you speak, speak for their benefit. Speak for their benefit. Now I want to turn to Job chapter 33, and Elihu is about to correct Job for some things he has said. Here are some statements found in Job 33, verse 9, verse 12, verse 32, and verse 33. Let me read them for you. He says, you say, I am pure without transgression. I am clean, and there is no iniquity in me. Jumping down, he says, behold, in this you are not right. I will answer you, for God is greater than man. Jumping down again, he says, if you have any words, answer me, speak, for I desire to justify you. If not, listen to me, be silent, and I will teach you some wisdom. So in these 3 statements, Elihu declares his rebuttal process. First, he restates something that Job has said. Second, he explains how it's wrong. And then third, and I think this is important, he explains that he's correcting Job for Job's benefit. He wants to justify him and see him in right standing before God. And Elihu engages these 3 steps a few times in his long dissertation, but it's this last step that I really have found intriguing. You know, I think most of the time when we're being given feedback by another person, right, we don't realize that the other person is trying to help us. We become emotionally hooked, so we focus on all the hurtful things being said and miss the help that they're trying to provide. You know, I will even admit to you guys that I used to perceive all feedback negatively, all of it, even feedback that was delivered appropriately. And when someone gave me feedback, I focused on things like the negative way the feedback was being delivered, or the negative traits of the person delivering it, what I had done wrong that led to the feedback, or even the hurt I had inflicted on someone else that resulted in the need to give the feedback in the first place. Now, I will say this. This is a pretty defeating list of things to focus on, right? And I was so focused on these things that every presentation of feedback became this difficult and negative experience for me. Eventually, I had to address this. I had to unlearn thinking this way and then start learning to listen to people differently. And the one thing that helped me delete all these negative scripts and write new ones was a few short words that I would actually speak silently to myself. When someone was giving me feedback, I would just say these words in my mind. Remember, God is trying to help you. Remember, God is trying to help you. God is trying to help you, Vince. You know what? It's a very simple script. I sometimes call this rescripting, preaching to yourself. And by doing this over and over, when someone was giving me feedback, I wrote a new script in my mind when people gave me feedback. But here was my best learning. By doing this, I also discovered that during feedback sessions, that most people were seeking to help me. Like Elihu here is with Job. Over time, I came to discover that all feedback, even poorly conveyed feedback, delivered by people of extremely poor character, was for my benefit. That God was always trying to help me in some way, even in ways sometimes I didn't want to be helped, right? So now let's step back for a minute, because I want to look at this from the other angle, not from the position of receiving feedback, but being the person who offers it. You know, like Elihu, when we have an opportunity to give someone some feedback and correct the wrongs of others, It's important to focus on the benefit, I think. And the feedback Elihu offers is relatively simple. It's entirely for Job's benefit. It's that Job is thinking too highly of himself. Elihu knows that the three friends have come to some wrong conclusions about God, which have led to some bad counsel, which have led to Job defending himself. Thus, he has elevated his righteousness a little bit too much. And Elihu corrects Job because he wants Job to stay low and God to stay high. What Elihu models is practical and spiritual, right? It's practical and spiritual. He is speaking up to correct the wrong for the other person's benefit, not his own. And he's staying focused on this in hopes that Job will see this as well. I think when we're giving feedback, right, we need to do the same. We need to stay focused on the benefit for others so that that other person will see that we actually deeply, deeply care about them. Number 3, if a situation demands you speak to the injustice. Speak to the injustice. I want to read about 4 or 5 different sections of chapters 34 and 35 here. Follow along if you can. Here's the first text. It appears in Job chapter 34, verses 5 through 6. Elihu says, "For Job has said, I am in the right, and God has taken away my right. In spite of my right, I am counted a liar. My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression." Next, he says, "Therefore, hear me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong." And then one more time. "Of a truth, God will not do wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice." And then one final verse. "If you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him?" Now, I'm referencing these 4 sections because I want you to notice the logic presented by Elihu here. It is very cunning. In fact, it is such a cunning presentation of logic. It dismantles all the broken logic of Job. In this order, this is what Elihu states, that Job's logic results in. Job has said, man has done right, therefore God has done wrong, therefore God is unjust. Therefore, and this is the conclusion, our sin affects God's justice. You know, I really think this is a crazy use of logic by Elihu to completely dismantle Job's argument. He just shows Job the natural conclusion of his reasoning. In fact, steps 1, 2, and 3 are what Job has concluded. Let me restate them again. Man has done right. God has done wrong. God is unjust. But Elihu shows Job that he needs to think it through a little further because he needs to take one more step. It's step number 4. Your logic concludes that our sin affects God's justice. But here's the deal. We have all used the same logic that Job does here. We do this all the time in human relationships. In arguments, we conclude that I have done right, they have done wrong, they are unjust. Don't we do this? I mean, I do, maybe you don't. But this is the basis for every human argument we have in life. But the problem here is that Job tries to use this logic to preserve himself before friends and God. And as Elihu points out, we cannot use this logic model with God because man always does wrong, God always does right. God is always just, and human sin never affects God's justice. Now, of all the things that Elihu says, I think Job 35 verse 6 is the ultimate haymaker. I mean, the absolute ultimate haymaker for Job and the 3 friends. It destroys all their reasoning and foregone conclusions. Again, listen to this wisdom. Elihu says this, if you have sinned, what do you accomplish against him? And if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? Well, the answer here is nothing. You do nothing to God. But notice this, and it's cunning and yet so simple. Elihu makes his point, his ultimate point, using questions. Simple but profound questions. Both Job and the three friends have to consider the conclusions of their reasoning on their own. And get this, it's critical. On the one hand, he wants Job to consider that his righteous acts do not affect God. On the other hand, he wants the friends to consider that sinful acts do not affect God. Neither affect God. Nothing affects him. This is such laser sharp focused reasoning and logic that it blows my mind. Seriously. So let's come back to the original point again. I think when a situation demands we speak, it's good to clarify the injustice. Because guess what? There's always going to be an injustice for which we desire to speak. And we should speak to it. But we should be able to identify the injustice and talk about it intelligibly. Elihu models this there. He's not just spouting off on social media. He's not sending out some sort of hateful email blast. He's not canceling people for no reason. He is speaking intelligibly about the issue and encouraging his brothers to consider the unfortunate end of their logic, using a couple of great questions by the way. Step number 4 is this. If a situation demands you speak, remember, it's not about you. It's not about you. Listen to these final words. They're Job 36, verses 22 and 23. Elihu says, "Behold, God is exalted in his power. Who is a teacher like him? Who has prescribed for him his way? Or who can say, you have done wrong?" So, as Elihu concludes, he's going to lead us on this great ascent toward the great teacher. It's his reminder to us that God is the teacher and we are the student. You know, even as we read the New Testament, we discover that Jesus took his cues directly, absolutely directly from God. Jesus said this in John 12, verse 49. "For I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me has himself given me a commandment, what to say and what to speak." You know, Elihu echoes this kind of father-son, teacher-student relationship, and he reminds us that man is merely a student of the one and only teacher. And if a situation demands we speak, we need to be reminding ourselves of this, that we shouldn't speak up to make a point, but to point people to God. You see, we are not the truth. And sometimes when we see a truth that someone else doesn't see, we like to draw attention to the fact that we see something that someone else doesn't see. You know all this does? It just only pits us against another person by using the truth to draw attention to ourselves. When, by the way, the only truth we know in this life is God's truth. Truth only exists in this world because God made it known. And we never possess this. We only get to proclaim what is already his. In fact, every time I preach or teach, just like I'm doing here, I am reminded about this. My goal when I teach is not to show you how much I know. I didn't make this stuff up. I'm not that smart. Just ask my wife. God is the one who came up with truth. I'm just reiterating it in a way that maybe you can understand it. And when I get to heaven, I'm pretty sure that God is going to charge me with a massive plagiarism lawsuit. So my goal isn't to get you to fall in love with me, but to fall in love with God, the creator of all the truth. Well, the end is this. Just remember, when you have to speak up, be humble. Remember that when you speak up, it's not about you. It's all about God. And when you open your mouth, you need to remember that you're trying to direct people to Him, to His truth, to a relationship with Him. It's not about you or me at all. It's always about Him. So there you have it. When you speak up, remember to do these 4 things that Elihu demonstrates for us in the chapters where he shares. Number 1, check your emotional dashboard before you speak. 2, speak for their benefit. 3rd, speak to the injustice. And 4th, remember, it's not about you. And as you do speak up, let God speak His truth in His way and His time. Thanks for joining me today. And remember, as always, live all in for Him who lived all in for you.